All right, ready to dive in something a little different. Today we're going deep on the 50th law.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one. Blending street smarts and, well, kind of ancient wisdom.
A unique combo for sure.
You've got Robert Greene, the guy who wrote all those books on power and strategy, and he teams up with 50 Cent.
50 Cent.
Yeah, who, as we know, went from, shall we say, a rough start to conquering the music industry, the business world.
And everything in between. But this isn't just a typical rags to riches story. We're really digging into how 50 Cent's fearlessness, really his lack of fear, played a huge role in his success.
And how we can all learn from that, right?
Exactly. Apply those principles to, well, whatever our own goals are.
Yeah, and they bring in all these historical figures to illustrate these points, like Napoleon, Frederick Douglass, Abraham Lincoln, Malcolm X. Even Socrates gets a shout out.
So let's start with 50 Cent's fearlessness. The book talks about how his upbringing, his environment, basically instilled in him this almost supernatural ability to not be afraid.
Right. Like most of us would be paralyzed by the risks he was facing on a daily basis.
Yeah.
But for him, it was normal.
It became his norm.
Yeah. And so it's almost like he developed an immunity to fear. And that really became a superpower when he entered the business world.
There's this anecdote in the book. 50 Cent just walks away from deals that weren't good for him. No hesitation, no bluffing, no nothing. He just walked.
Like it didn't faze him at all.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point. That throws people off balance.
It does. It makes you seem more powerful than you might actually be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It gives you leverage, especially in a world where everyone's kind of playing it safe, tiptoeing around.
Right.
So the book isn't saying be like 50 Cent, be reckless. It's really about understanding that fear is often a mental barrier, one that we create for ourselves.
It's about recognizing that and then choosing to act in spite of it.
Yes.
And so to illustrate this, they bring in these historical figures like Napoleon, who they kind of present as this ultimate fearless leader.
Yeah. And there's this great story, about Napoleon leading his army across the Alps.
Oh, yeah.
And his advisors, they were telling him it was impossible. The terrain's too treacherous. You can't do it. But Napoleon, he just refused to accept those limitations.
It's almost like he had this belief.
He did. He had this unshakable belief in his ability to just create favorable circumstances, even when everyone else saw only obstacles.
Like turning a mountain into a molehill.
Exactly.
They also highlight Frederick Douglass. Now, talk about an incredible journey, escaping slavery, becoming this leading voice in the abolitionist movement.
It's powerful. And Douglass, he embodies this idea of confronting fear directly.
Head on.
Yeah. He taught himself to read and write, risking, serious punishment. He escaped to the North and then dedicated his life to fighting for the freedom of others.
Constantly challenging the status quo.
So for him, fearlessness wasn't about being reckless or ignoring danger. It was about, what did he truly value? Freedom. And he was willing to take calculated risks to achieve that.
To achieve those goals. So let's shift gears for a second. Talk about this concept of turning shit into sugar, which is, it's central to the 50th law.
It's so simple, yet so profound. It's like choosing to see setbacks, obstacles, as opportunities for growth.
Like changing your perspective.
Exactly. Reframing those negative experiences.
And 50 Cent's life is such a powerful example of that. The guy was shot, almost died. He could have easily let that destroy him.
Right.
But instead,
Right.
he turned it into fuel. It became part of his music, his business, his entire image. Like he literally turned a near-death experience into this engine for his success.
It's incredible. It's like even in the darkest moments, there's a seed of opportunity there.
Oh, yeah.
And the book, he also talks about Alexander Selkirk, the real-life Robinson Crusoe, marooned on this island for years.
Alone.
Totally isolated. But instead of giving in to despair, he adapted, he became resourceful, and, he found a kind of fulfillment in that solitude.
So it's like, even when faced with what seems impossible, this opportunistic mindset makes all the difference.
Yeah. Like seeing the potential for power, for growth in these unexpected places.
And that brings us to another key theme, mastery. The 50th law is really pushing back against this modern obsession with instant gratification, get rich quick schemes.
Oh, yeah, we are bombarded with those messages.
Right.
But the book, it argues that real power comes from dedicating yourself to a craft, a process.
Embracing the long game.
Exactly. Right. And understanding that true mastery takes time and effort and, honestly, a willingness to go through the less glamorous parts of the journey.
The hard parts.
Yeah.
And they contrast this with stories of some of 50 Cent's peers who they wanted the quick wins, the easy path. and they ultimately fizzled out.
It's a good cautionary tale to remind us to stay focused on the long term.
Right, and they share the story of Isaac Newton, who made some of his, well, biggest scientific breakthroughs during a plague quarantine.
Wow.
No distractions, just deep, uninterrupted work.
That's a powerful message for all of us, especially today, with all these distractions around us.
It really is. It's about recognizing that mastery takes focus and dedication, and finding satisfaction not just in the destination, but the journey itself.
Exactly. It's about the entire process.
And it's interesting how they connect this idea of mastery to really understanding your audience. Like, it's not enough to just hone your craft in isolation.
Yeah. You got to know who you're creating for, who you're connecting with.
Exactly.
And they use 50 Cent's approach to marketing his music, which, I mean, he was so ahead of his time.
Oh, he was.
Using online fan feedback to actually shape his music. Back then, most artists were totally disconnected.
Yeah, they relied on their labels, their marketing people to tell them what to do.
Right. Stuck in the old ways. But 50 Cent, he went directly to his fans and used their feedback, even their criticism.
To make the music better.
Exactly. Which is revolutionary, really.
It really was. And that takes confidence, doesn't it? To be open to that kind of feedback, even when it might not be positive.
It does. But he saw it as an opportunity to build that connection with his audience. A real relationship.
And the book makes this, well, kind of a surprising connection to Eleanor Roosevelt, who you wouldn't necessarily think of alongside 50 Cent. But she also understood the importance of connecting with her audience.
Yeah. In her case, the American people. She wasn't content to just stay in the White House bubble.
Yeah.
She went out there, talked to everyday folks, really trying to understand their struggles, their hopes. And she used that feedback to inform her work and even influence her husband's policies.
So both 50 Cent and Eleanor Roosevelt, totally different worlds.
Right.
But they both got this key principle. Stay connected to your audience, be open to feedback.
And use that to shape your work, make a real impact. And that's a lesson for all of us.
It is.
Now, this is where the book takes kind of a darker turn.
Oh, yeah.
It dives into this idea of confronting mortality.
Like acknowledging our own, well, our own death.
Exactly. It might seem counterintuitive, but the idea is that when you really face that reality, everything else gets put into perspective.
The things that used to scare you.
They don't seem as big anymore.
And they tie this back to 50 Cent's experience of almost dying. How that really sharpened his focus, gave him a sense of urgency.
Until he lived his life, right?
Yeah.
It's like he realized how precious, how fleeting life really is. The book also mentions Ernest Hemingway.
Oh, interesting.
Who, I mean, he was always seeking out danger and risk.
Bullfighting, big game hunting.
It's like he needed to confront death to really feel alive.
So it's not just about adrenaline or thrill-seeking.
No. It's about embracing the full experience of life, even the dark parts.
So how do we apply this without, running with the bulls?
Right. It could be simpler than that. Appreciating the small moments, pursuing something that scares you a little, trying new things.
Saying yes more.
Yes. And that brings us to another big idea, self-reliance.
Which is huge,
Yeah.
especially today.
Right. We're often told to rely on these external structures, a job, the government, other people, for our security, our sense of purpose.
But the 50th law argues that true power comes from cultivating this inner strength, independence.
Exactly. They use this example of a guy named Carter, wrongly imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit.
Wow.
And instead of giving up, he used that time to build himself up. He read, taught himself law, even tutored other inmates.
That's incredible, turning a negative into a positive.
He wouldn't let the system break him. He took control.
And that's so powerful. It connects to the whole entrepreneurial spirit that 50 Cent embodies. Create your own path.
Own your destiny. And the 50th law encourages all of us to do that.
Take ownership. Embrace the challenges as opportunities for growth. Become the architects of our own lives.
Exactly. We have more power than we realize to shape our own destinies.
The 50th law gives us this blueprint, right, for a more fearless and empowered life.
It is a call to action to examine our relationship with fear, challenge those limitations we've placed on ourselves, and be more active, more opportunistic.
Move beyond the fear of failure, the fear of judgment. Step into the arena ready to create, to connect, to conquer.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, I want to leave you with this. What's one area of your life where you've been holding back because of fear?
What could you achieve if you really embrace these principles, embodied that spirit of fearlessness? Makes you think, huh. And if you're really intrigued, I mean, you gotta check out the 50th Law for yourself.
It's one of those books that can really, shift your whole perspective, give you a new way of looking at
A
things.
whole new framework for dealing with challenges.
Yeah. And it stays with you. Even after you finish reading it, you find yourself coming back to the ideas.
It's almost like a secret weapon.
It is. Like a little reminder that you have the power to choose fearlessness, to shape your own reality, to be the master of your own destiny.
And that's what's so empowering about it. It's not just abstract ideas. It gives you practical tools, strategies you can actually use.
Exactly. In everyday life,
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this. What would your life look like if you truly embraced fearlessness?
what risks would you take? What dreams would you go after?
What kind of impact could you make?
Those are big questions.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think the answers are already inside each of us. We all have that potential for greatness, for courage. It's just a matter of tapping into it, choosing fearlessness, stepping into the unknown.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the 50th Law. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and keep pushing those boundaries.